Hello Bloomington, I'm Mayor Tim Busse, and this is the Council Minute for the week of March 20th. On Monday night, the City Council postponed a decision on a proposed City Code amendment that would have updated zoning and platting standards for single and two-family homes and lots, and a related comprehensive plan text amendment that would have revised what low-density residential and medium-density residential actually means. We heard a lot of feedback from residents on this issue, and the Council had a very good discussion, and we ultimately decided that the conversation needs to continue. It's a conversation that's happening in cities across Minnesota and across the country, as we all work on solutions to make housing that people can afford available in our community. We spent 3 hours talking about this on Monday, and you're certainly welcome to watch the recording if you'd like, but I'll do my best to summarize things here. Current zoning standards don't allow single-family homes smaller than 1,040 square feet, and two-family dwellings or duplexes must be at least 960 square feet per unit. And zoning also requires that all homes must have a minimum of 2 garage stalls per unit. Now, that wasn't always the case. You don't have to look very hard to see smaller homes that were built here in Bloomington prior to the establishment of minimum home sizes. These homes function very well. They're relatively affordable, and they do a good job of meeting the needs of the people who live in them. Smaller homes serve many residents very well, including single, senior, or two-person households, and even smaller families. The proposed amendments we talked about on Monday night would have reduced the minimum floor areas of single and two-family homes and the lots they sit on. It would have changed some setback requirements and reduced the minimum number of garage stalls needed to 1 per unit. Now, of course, homeowners would have still been allowed to build much larger homes and garages, but the amendments reducing the minimum requirements for single and two-family homes would provide options for people who want something smaller, something more affordable, and something that better fits their needs. We've also talked quite a bit about the growth recently in rental housing opportunities in Bloomington, many of which include an affordable component. But we've also talked about how new home ownership opportunities has been a tough nut to crack. Home ownership is important in that it builds individual wealth, which obviously is a big deal. And when you layer the benefits of home ownership on top of the disparity in home ownership in Bloomington, the need for some creative solutions becomes apparent. In 2021, Bloomington home ownership rates among white residents was 74%. That percentage drops off dramatically as you look at other races and ethnicities, and only about 27% of Black or African American residents own their own homes in Bloomington. During the public hearing on Monday night, and in emails that I received prior to the meeting, the majority of people who spoke up were opposed to the proposed changes. They talked about changing the nature of Bloomington neighborhoods, the potential impacts on wildlife and natural areas, and had concerns about increased on-street parking, density, and the one-size-fits-all nature of the proposal. Many agreed that housing is a significant issue, but that these proposed changes didn't seem quite right for Bloomington. Ultimately, a majority of the City Council agreed and decided to continue this conversation. And honestly, this doesn't feel like we're simply kicking the can down the road. This notion of equitable infill development and addressing the sizable home ownership gap in Bloomington is specifically called out in our Bloomington Tomorrow Together strategic plan. On Monday night, I heard the Council's commitment to doing something and the desire to look at this issue through Bloomington's always creative and innovative lens. Stay tuned. On Monday night, the Council also kicked off a discussion regarding a potential increase in franchise fees in Bloomington. The City of Bloomington has been collecting a franchise fee on electric and gas utility bills since 2016. Franchise fees have been a sustainable and consistent funding source for our enormously successful pavement management program. The Pavement Management Program, or the PMP, is the work we do to keep our city streets and trails in such good condition. Lots of communities don't have a pavement management program, and you can really see the difference this time of year. The PMP includes street overlays, seal coating, and sidewalk and trail construction and maintenance. Bloomington started collecting franchise fees back in 2016. The plan was to look at a possible increase in 2021. Because of COVID, we delayed that scheduled increase to 2022, and we're now starting the process of an increase in franchise fees to continue funding a portion of the PMP. The proposed increase is an additional $1.35 for each month for residential units, which would bring the total to $5.95 for both electric and gas utilities. And as I said, that money goes specifically to the construction and maintenance of our 341 miles of streets, our 210 miles of concrete sidewalks, and our 43 miles of trails in Bloomington. As always, We want to hear what you think. There's a Let's Talk Bloomington page open on this topic. A public open house is scheduled for April 13th, and we'll have a public hearing at our May 1st council meeting. More details are available on the city website. Finally today, last week we learned that Governor Tim Walz included $10 million in his 2024 supplemental budget to support Minnesota's efforts related to Expo 2027. It's big news for a couple of reasons. It shows once again that the state of Minnesota is fully committed to the Expo, and the significant financial backing helps with the very practical challenge of moving the bid process forward. You've heard me say many times before, Expo 2027 is an independent, not-for-profit 501c3 organization with its own board of directors, its own leadership, and its own fundraising apparatus. Bloomington would be the host city, and we're working very closely with the bid committee, but this is not a City of Bloomington or a Bloomington Port Authority bid. This is the official bid of the United States of America. Expo 2027 will be organized and operated as a public-private partnership. Public-private financial model for the Expo relies substantially on event revenues and corporate sponsorships, so the cash flow is heavily backweighted. The challenge is that if Bloomington is chosen to host the Expo, work will need to start this summer, long before any budgeted revenue comes in. The $10 million is contingent on Bloomington winning the Expo bid and would be used for things like finalizing the Expo dossier, development planning and coordination, infrastructure design and planning, and staffing. In addition to being part of the governor's supplemental budget, there's also legislation moving through both the Minnesota Senate and the Minnesota House in support of the funding. Earlier this month, City Manager Jamie Verbrugge and I testified in the Senate Jobs and Economic Development Committee and in front of the House Economic Development, Finance and Policy Committee. For most legislators, this was their first opportunity to ask questions and learn more about the Expo. And I think it's fair to say that legislators from both parties and from both the Metro and Greater Minnesota were very interested in the Expo and spoke generally in favor of the event. Thanks to Senator Melissa Wickland and Representative Nathan Coulter for sponsoring these bills. That will do it for this week's Council Minute. Thanks so very much for joining me. Until next time, stay safe, Bloomington.